Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to this week's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing. And man, I really appreciate you guys making some time out of your day to watch the video. I know it's a little bit more of a commitment watching these advanced bass fishing videos because they're longer. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. Really appreciate it. Got a good video for you guys this week, guys. What I'm going to do in the video is I've got most all of my favorite soft plastic lures here, the different categories like creature baits, worms, lizards, that type of stuff. I'm going to talk about the proper hook to match them up with as far as the hook size and hook style. Guys, this is probably one of the most overlooked aspects of bass fishing because the hook size and the style that you put in your soft plastic lure, there's two different things it does. Number one, it can get you more bites, or it can reduce the amount of bites that you get. And number two, it will make a big impact as far as landing those fish that you get and not losing them. So choosing the right hook is really critical, and it's a little bit more complicated than what it seems. There's so many different hook styles and brands and variations out there that we're gonna give you guys my opinion on that. I think it's gonna add up to really some increased success with your soft plastics after you watch this video. Also guys, just our weekly housekeeping tip here before we get started. I just want to remind everybody, if you like the advanced bass fishing videos here and you get something out of them, the best way that you can show your support for the channel is to go into the link in my description here and use and bookmark my Tackle Warehouse link. Guys, everybody that's doing that's really helping the channel out. If you use that link that I put in the description to purchase your fishing tackle at Tackle Warehouse, channel gets a small percentage of anything you buy there, the commission on it, and really good way to help out. And also please check out our Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns. We got lake map breakdowns for lakes all across the country, all 4 seasons of the year. Really good resource to learn more about your favorite lake or a lake you've never been to. And we also got my solar bat sunglasses links and everything in there. So much appreciated for the support there from me and my family. Okay guys, you guys know I always like to give a little backstory before I start the video here. Now, hook technology has come a long way, guys. If you've just started out in bass fishing, most of the hooks that are available anymore, they're chemically sharpened hooks. And the ones I'm going to be talking about, guys, I use the Gamakatsu G Finesse line of hooks for everything. I think it's the best hook that there is out there. Like I said, I'll link all this stuff in the description of the video that I'm talking about today. But chemically sharpened hooks are the norm, but it wasn't always that way. I mean, up until probably about 10 years ago, hooks were not chemically sharpened. They dulled very quickly, and I carried files with me all the time, and throughout the course of a day, I'd touch up the point on a hook probably a dozen times during my fishing day. That was just what we did. And now with the chemically sharpened hooks out there, you don't have to do that anymore. They're razor sharp, they're a little bit more durable. When they first came out with chemically sharpened hooks, they bend over, they dulled really easy, but the technology in them has really improved a lot. So most of the time you don't have to ever sharpen them. Now, once in a while, if you don't, like I said, some of these chemically sharpened hooks are a little bit more expensive than others, but if you dull one, like on a rock or something, you can still sharpen it with a file, but most of the time you really have to put some serious damage on those points to make them break. And also the makeup of the hook has changed. It's like overall the diameter of the hooks have gotten smaller, and also the barb that's on the treble hooks have gotten smaller. Now, one of the things I want to talk about a little bit before we get into, let's talk about hook diameter and barbs. Now, ideally, there's several different factors that you have to consider in any soft plastic hook. You have to consider the diameter of the hook, because the diameter has a lot to do with how much the hook stands out visually, and it also has a lot to do with how easy the hook penetrates. The larger diameter hooks that you use are more difficult to penetrate into a fish's mouth, so you always want to try to stay with a small diameter hook if possible. The next aspect of that is the size of the barb on there. Now, most hooks prior to the modern hooks that we have here, they had pretty big barbs on them. Problem with the big barb hook, there's an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is once you get the barb in the fish, you're not going to lose them, hardly ever, simply because you've got that barb in place. Downside of it, a lot of times it's very difficult to get the barb penetrated in the fish's mouth. A lot of times you just get the point in there and you don't penetrate. So now what you have in the modern hooks like the Gamakatsu G Finesses here, you've got small diameter, you got small barbs on there, which makes for easy penetration, And you've got the stiffness. That's the third aspect of it. You can test the stiffness of the hook by bending a little bit. Sometimes it's okay to have a hook that bends a little bit based upon, you know, the type of lure category you're using, soft plastic. Sometimes you don't want a hook ever to bend. You want a stiff hook, like if you're flipping and pitching with braided line. So we're going to get into all that in the video here. But what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm going to show you all of my favorite soft plastic baits that I got. I got about a dozen of them here, and these are the ones I use. This type of category of soft plastic lures, what I use for everything. Say, for example, I use a Zoom Z-Hog here. You guys might use a beaver. That's a creature bait. That's what I mean by a lure category. And I'm going to show you the type of hook I use in it, the size of the hook, and I'm going to explain to you why in the video. So take a quick break here, guys, and we'll come back and get started. Okay, guys, we're back here. Now, what I'm going to start out with, guys, is I'm going to talk about the offset hook, or, you know, more commonly referred to as an EWG hook, versus a straight shank hook. You know, when you want to use which. So here's the two categories here. This is a straight shank hook that you have, which has got a straight shank. These Gamakatsu hooks, guys, have what's called an O'Shaughnessy bend on it. It's not perfectly round. It's got a little bit of an offset on it, which is really good for hooking the fish. And this is what's called an EWG hook. This is a Gamakatsu hybrid EWG. And the EWG, it's got a similar bend on the hook, the O'Shaughnessy style, but it's got a wider gap and it's got an offset on here. So this is the two different styles. Now, these two different styles, the EWG is a lot more user-friendly because once you do get it in place, it tends to stay there a lot longer. It's easier to rig your bait straight on it. So for a lot of anglers, when they just get started out, they really like that EWG style because it's a little bit easier to use. But in my experiments and in my experience in bass fishing, I prefer the straight shank most all the time because I just think it hooks the fish better. When I look back, and I've done both, guys. I went through periods where I used nothing but EWGs for 2 or 3 years, and then vice versa. And when I did my analysis on the actual bite to catch ratio, I probably landed about 20% more fish on a straight shank hook. So I use straight shank hooks almost exclusively now. So except for two different lure categories, and we're going to start out with that. I'm going to show you the only two lure categories that I do use an EWG hook on. Now the first one is a tube. Guys, a tube, you can't really use a straight shank hook on a tube because the tube is hollow and the hook will not simply stay in place. So on an EWG hook, this is what I use with the tube. You know, come through like that, and then a lot of times I'll take on a tube, I'll give you guys a little tip here. Instead of just putting the hook back in the center of the tube, take a second and split that tube, you know, like 1/4 of an inch. See, I got it split open there, and that gives you a little bit of a track to put the hook in, and I just find that it hooks the fish a lot better. And then you lay it in there like that. And one of the things on a tube is, see how that hook is laying right on the top there? If you can get away with it, try not to put it back into the plastic. Try to leave it outside like that. And you can see it's completely flush against there. So I'm not getting any, you know, point on there, but that will allow you to hook the fish a lot better. So that's what I use. This is one of the times that I do use the EWG is on a tube. And on the other one that I use is a fluke or sluggo or something like that. But I'll show you another way to rig it here. Most people use a fluke with an EWG hook like this. And it works okay, but it doesn't hook the fish the best. I'll show you the best way to do it. So this is the way you hook the fluke. You come through the same way, just leave it like that. But the problem with this is you lose a lot of fish like this. You've got a lot of plastic here on a fluke. It's pretty wide. So I found out that this is not a very efficient way to fish it, but a lot of people like to fish it like this because it's easy. And I will fish it like this if I'm fishing it around thick cover, like around grass that's really snaggy. Sometimes I'll fish it like that. But overall, on my fluke here, this is the way I fish it, guys. I use a straight shank hook on my fluke. I'll usually take about probably about a, 3/0 hook or something like this. And I come through the bottom of it. And I'm gonna thread it all the way through. And I'm gonna come out the bottom of the fluke. This is how I fish it probably 95% of the time, is with this hook coming out the bottom like that, a straight shank hook. And guys, you don't miss them like this. When one hits it like this, you just set the hook and you got them. And another good thing about like this, when you rig it like this, it tends to want to make the fluke go down instead of like blow out of the water. A lot of the problems you have with an EWG when you rig that, it tends to, when you twitch that fluke, it wants to pop out of the water. But if you put a straight shank hook on it and put a little bit of a bend in it, like just a little bit of a bend like that, it'll make that, every time you twitch it, it'll make that fluke go down in the water and it'll dart side to side real erratically. So that's my fluke hook on there. Another thing before we get into the rest of them, guys, let's talk a little bit about the size of hook that you want to use. Now, we'll go into this a little bit here because it is something worth mentioning. The size of the hook that you put in a soft plastic lure is really critical, because anytime that you have a hook in a soft plastic lure, it is a strike deterrent. It's a visual strike deterrent to the fish. So you always want to use the smallest hook that you can get away with for two different reasons. Number one, it's a strike deterrent visually, and number two, you will hook more fish with a smaller hook because you usually have a smaller diameter. Now, let me give you an example. A lot of you guys that have watched intuitive angling, I've referred to this story before, but it's worth repeating it, even if you've heard it again, and if you haven't, you'll understand why. I went through a period, like a lot of people, where I felt that the bigger the hook that I used, the better chance I had to catch the fish, because it's a stronger hook. I got a wider gap on it, and if I get that big hook in the fish, I'm not going to lose it. That is a myth in fishing, and I found out the hard way, because I did this for probably 10 years at least, maybe 15 years. I tried to use some of the biggest hooks I could get away with without it looking absolutely gaudy or something like that. And I was losing a lot of fish. And this is how I figured out that wasn't true. Two different ways. Number one, I used to use bigger hooks on treble hooks, on hard baits. And then I got talking to some of the guys that fished in California about 15 or 20 years ago that showed me some of the hooks that they use, like on jerk baits and crank baits. And I looked at those hooks and I said, God, those things are freaking tiny. I'd never use a hook that small. And guys, they never lost them. And I was fishing with Yuki Ito down at Lake Fork years ago. Yuki Ito is the owner of Mega Bass. He's a bait designing genius. And we were fishing a little Mega Bass Griffin crankbait down there at Lake Fork for big ones. And anyway, this little Griffin has got little bitty tiny hooks on it. I'm looking at that thing and I'm going, Yuki, I said, well, those things look like your perch hooks. Are you gonna fish with that? He goes, those are the hooks you want to use. He said, you want to adjust your rod action, not your hook size. And he caught 2 6-pounders on that crankbait the day we fished on those little bitty hooks and never lost them. So that's on treble hooks. On the straight shank hooks, this is how I found out myself. I was in a period of about a 10 or 12 year period that I was losing probably 20 to 25% of the fish that I hooked on a soft plastic, whether I was casting a worm or pitching and flipping or whatever. On average, I'd lose 25% of them. And I just thought that was probably norm. So anyway, I was down at Grand Lake practicing for an FLW tournament, and I've got a box here. Let me show you guys. I keep an old box. This is full of like my old junky hooks here. These are hooks that like have got some rust on them, or just oddball hooks and stuff like that. That's my practice box that I use in practicing for tournaments, because I don't care if I catch them or not. I just want to get the bite and usually shake them off. But anyway, I was fishing down there at Grand Lake, and the water was up in the willow trees. And I had a full-size brush hog, big brush hog, and all I had was like a little 2-aught hook, like a little 2-aught thin wire hook on there. And like I said, I didn't care if I lost them or not, because I was trying to shake them off in practice. And I put that little 2-aught hook on there, which looked ridiculously small on a brush hog. It looked like it was just not even there. And guys, I couldn't get those fish off. It's like they'd bite it, and I'd sit there trying to shake them off, and every time they'd swim, I'd shake it, try to shake them and shake them and shake them, and eventually I hooked them, and they were all hooked perfectly through the roof of the mouth. So I got thinking about it. It's like, that's really weird. And I went out the next day of the tournament, and I went to my traditional big hooks, flipping a brush hog on a big hook. And guys, I had 11 bites flipping, good ones. I'm talking 3 to 5 pounders. I had 11 bites that first day flipping that brush hog with the big hook, and I lost every one of them except 2. I only had 2 fish that day, and I should have had over 20 pounds. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I said, what I got to lose? So the next day, I went to the little bitty tiny small hook in the brush hog. I had 12 bites and never lost a single one of them. And ever since then, I go down on my soft plastics. And here's another reason to remember that is in practice, a lot of times I will cut the hook off completely. And so what I'll do is say I'll take an EWG like this, and I'll just take a pair of side cutters and I'll just cut it off right there. And then I'll peg that in with a toothpick in the soft plastic so the fish can't pull it off. And the number of bites that I get with no hook on there is probably 25 to 30% higher than when you go to a hook in the tournament day. So the point of it is, guys, it's sort of counterintuitive what a lot of people think. It's like, but go smaller. It's like when you put your hook in your soft plastic, go to the next size smaller. Go to the size smaller that almost makes you feel uncomfortable that it's too small. And I can promise you, you'll get more bites and you'll land more fish by doing that. So that's one thing to remember with that. And that depends on the bait. I mean, the diameter and size of the bait, totally depends on, the look of the hook. But I'll give you guys some examples here in a second. So, okay, guys, I'm gonna take a quick drink. Take a quick break and get a drink, and I'll be right back. Okay, guys, we're back. Let's keep moving on through the bait selection here. Next, guys, we'll talk about creature baits. Now, creature baits are a little bit different. Profile's different than from a worm, so it requires a different hook and a different presentation. So there's 2 different type of hook selections that I use on any type of a creature bait. Now, it doesn't matter if you use a Sweet Beaver or the Z-Hog or Z-Craw or whatever your favorite soft plastic manufacturer is, but there's 2 different sizes of hooks that I use in here. Now the first one this is a 4/0 Gamakatsu G-Finesse super heavy cover worm hook. This is a little bit larger diameter. So this 4/0, and first of all, guys, this is as big as I go. This is the biggest hook that I have for any of my soft plastics is a 4/0. You can see the bite on that thing on there. You don't need any more than that. If you put, I do have some 5/0s here. Let me show you how big these things are. To give you an idea. Here's a 5/0, and here's a 4/0 with it there. You can see, actually, I got the wrong one there. Got my glasses on there. Oh, here it is. Here's the 5/0 here, and there's the 4/0. So this thing is a 5/0 here, which is a giant hook. This is actually the hook I use on a horny toad, but I'm not going to use it for today's deal. So I've got a 4/0 straight shank hook on the creature bait, and I do this on all the creatures. So the 4/0 here, this is going to be for heavy duty pitching and flipping. This is going to be something where I'm using like pitching braid into matted vegetation, or if I'm fishing super heavy flooded cover with 25, 30 pound line, and you can see how that sets in there. Just comes straight through. A lot of times, guys, when you come straight through here on a creature bait, you do have to put just a little bit of it back in the point there. But you can see how that sets in there nice. Even though that's a 4/0 hook, see how that sort of sets in there sort of nice? That is the heavy cover type of a presentation. Now, if I'm pitching this thing around some type of more sparse cover, let's say I'm pitching and flipping this creature bait around a dock piling or around a stump or something like that, where I'm not inside of some thick cover like a grass bed or a mat or a flooded bush, I go down to a 3/0 here, which is a little bit smaller diameter. And I'll put that 3/0 in there. And I'll show you how, guys, this looks like it's too small, but it's not. Put that 3/0 in there the same way, and you can see the difference. This is even smaller with that. It blends in really nice with it, doesn't stand out too much. 3/0 hook works really good with any type of creature bait on the sparse cover with a little bit lighter line. Again, it's all about diameter. The bigger the hook that you go to, the larger diameter it's going to be. So that's creature bait. And the same is also true, guys, with a brush hog. A brush hog is one of my favorite baits on there. Let me show you a couple little tricks on a brush hog here, which is one of everybody's favorite. I usually use a 3/0 hook on a brush hog. So I'll come through like that, and then the next thing I'll do, guys, is I'll take and I'll break these legs off, open the legs on them. And the reason I do this is because I'm hooking in the side. And this is one of the things on any plastic worm, we've talked about this before, you don't ever want to hook it straight in the middle like that. See how that hook's right in the middle of it? Because if you hook it right in the middle, on a straight shank worm like this, it's a tremendous amount of plastic. So anytime that you've got any type of a round type worm or any type of a round body like that, you just want to come in and just barely skin hook it in the side. And that's why I take the thing, see how I got that, just the skin hooked in the side like that? And then when it's completely weedless. You can flip it and pitch it in the thickest cover, but when you set the hook, that's just gonna break free and you're gonna get that hook in that fish. So learn to set it in the side. I'll give you a couple more tips with that. But anyway, the brush hog, same deal, 3/0 straight shank hook with that. Now, couple other things here. Sometimes I'll flip and pitch some type of a craw like this. This is a Zoom Speed Craw. Most companies make some type of a craw. And normally when you're fishing a craw, you're fishing it around, pitching and flipping it around a little bit heavy cover. A lot of people use it as a trailer, but a craw is a really good flipping and pitching bait for mats. Now, one of the things that I'll do on a craw is I do go to a little bit bigger hook on the thing, simply because if I'm fishing around a little bit heavier cover. So again, I may go to the 4/0 hook on there, and this is a little bit different because simply the profile of the bait, and I want the hook long enough to where it goes almost to the bottom of the bait. So I'm going to show you two different applications, one for heavy flipping, one for light flipping. Now this would be for the heavy duty flipping situation. Got that in there. So that is for flipping and pitching mats, something like that with the 4/0, which looks a little bit big. I mean, something like this, guys, looks a little big for it. Normally I wouldn't use that except for mats, but most of the time I'm going with the lighter wire 3/0, and I'll show you the difference on how it looks with it. Coming through there. It's about a 1/4 of an inch shorter, I'm guessing. And see that 3/0 lays in there a little bit neater like that. But anyway, straight shank right through the middle on the little craw baits. Okay, guys, the next one is it's another bait that I do use with both on it. Now, here's a couple different scenarios with it. We're talking about a lizard on there, which was one of my favorite baits. Some of this stuff, it seems sort of counter. It seems like I'm contradicting myself, but it's all technique specific, or the situations are different. Now, a lizard is one of those other baits. It's sort of like, the fluke or the tube that we're talking about here, as far as the EWG can work in it, and sometimes under certain situations. One of my favorite ways to fish a lizard is to swim a lizard. So I use two different hooks based upon if I'm pitching it, flipping it, swimming it, or flipping and pitching it into cover, or swimming it. Now, if I'm swimming a lizard, which I really like to do in the early spring and during the springtime, guys, if you haven't tried that, swimming a lizard works really good in the springtime. Just throw it out there, keep your rod tip high, and just reel it just underneath the surface around shallow cover. You can catch a lot of fish with it. And if you swim it, you do have to use an EWG hook, because the EWG hook, it has that keel on it. It provides the keel like that, which allows that lizard to go straighter. So I hook them straight in there, comes straight back to the thing like that. And the EWG hook will allow that lizard to go straight through the water like that. And if you try to use this on a straight shank hook, a lot of times it'll roll off to the side. So I do use the EWG if I'm swimming it. But most of the time, if I'm flipping and pitching a lizard, I'm going with the 3/0 straight shank hook again. Same one we talked about. Come through about a 1/4 of an inch or so. And I'm gonna be coming all the way through the top on it as well. Now the lizard is one of those ones that I don't skin hook it in the side, because on a lizard, most of the time where you put the hook in there, it's in the neck part, which is a little bit thinner. So I'll come in just like that and bury that hook point, back in the worm like that. So that's my lizard setup. Another thing with that, I've tried hooking the lizard, skin hooking it, like that a little bit. But if you try to skin hook it there, the way that lizard is designed, it just sort of falls through the water all funky here. So I do usually come straight through the top of the lizard with that. Okay, the next one is another deal as far as, both can work on it, as far as depending upon when you're due, and that is a soft plastic stick bait. Like a Senko, this is, one of my favorite lures of all time. Two different ways that I do fish a soft plastic stick bait based upon if I'm fishing it with weightless or not weightless. Now, if I'm fishing it weightless, guys, I do like an EWG hook, simply again because of the keel it offers. If you fish the soft plastic stick bait with an EWG on it with no weight, it's falling slow, and it tends to fall a lot more natural looking with that EWG. If you try to put the straight shank in there without any weight on it, and you hook it in the side like I normally hook it, it just seems like it falls funky. So that's the way I fish it with no weight. And to be honest with you guys, I don't fish a soft plastic stick bait with no weight very often. If I'm fishing it with no weight, I'm usually wacky rigging it like this. The only times I'll fish at Texas rig with no weight is in really heavy vegetation, but that's how I fish it most of the time with it. But the other way that I fish a soft plastic stick bait, most of the time when I'm pitching it, flipping it, with some type of a slip sinker, is the same deal. Just come straight through it like that, skin hook it in the side, nice like that, comes right through there. Guys, I can't tell you how many fish I've caught on this setup here. Pitching this, flipping this thing on like an 1/8 ounce sinker works really good with that. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick little breakdown, and guys, we're down. We got 3 left, we got 4. We got 4 baits left. Take a quick break. We'll be right back and get finished up. Okay guys, we're back with the last 4 bait categories here. And I know some of this may seem redundant, but the thing about it is it gives you an idea. It's like there's every lure that I'm talking about here, I consider it a soft plastic category. These are all Zoom baits that I'm using, but I'm not telling you guys, need to use Zoom or whatever. But every company, it doesn't matter what bait company you have, every one of them has a category or lures like this, so you can use this information to know exactly what hook to use in each specific lure. Okay guys, so next one, let's move on to the Zoom trick worm here. Now, trick worm, most of the time I've used it on a shaky head, but it is a really good pitching and flipping lure. I like to fish it around, any type of a shallow cover. It's really good around boat docks, especially like piling type docks. Really good worm to use in the summertime, pitching and flipping. So on the Zoom trick worm, I go to, this is a 1/0 Gamakatsu G finesse hook. And same type of the deal on this. The trick worm is one, you could probably go through the center of it, but I still prefer to hook it on the side. I've just had more success on that. But on the Zoom trick worm, 1/0 hook on there like that, skin hooked in the side, not gonna get hooked there. Sets in there good, and I usually pitch and flip that on maybe 17, sometimes 20-pound test line, depending upon the water visibility. Now, another worm that I use quite a bit, guys, this is the Zoom Magnum finesse worm. Now, this is it's the same finesse worm design, except it's just fatter diameter. It's quite a bit, bigger. So therefore, I can't use a 1/0 on this thing because the diameter is a little bit bigger on it. So this is when I'll go to the 2/0 hook. So Zoom finesse worm, I don't know if you guys ever seen this, but this is a really good pitching and flipping bait too. I use it on a shaky head, but I'll put it on a 2/0 Gamakatsu straight shank. Same type of deal, come right through the middle. Got a nice setting there, good little setup on that. Next one is this is a Zoom Ultra Vibe Speed Worm. Now this type of a worm, you could apply it to, whatever you're wanting to do with it. I mean, just any type of a 7 to 8 inch plastic worm. I have found from my own personal experience, guys, that the best hook size for this is, again, it's the 3/0 straight shank hook. Once again, same type of rigging deal through the side. Nice setting in there like that. Next one we'll talk about is a large worm. This is a Zoom Old Monster worm. So the big worms like this is another thing that's going to surprise you. You would say it's like, oh, this is a big honking worm, you need to use the biggest hook. Guys, this is one of my favorite worms. I've caught a ton of fish on the Zoom Old Monster, but the hook that I use on it, guys, is a 3/0. I don't go any bigger than a 3/0 hook. I'll show you what it looks like in there. Sets in there really nice. This is one of those worms I used to use a 5/0 hook a lot in it, 4 and 5/0. But since I went to the 3/0, I get a lot more bites on it. I don't lose any fish. Most of the time when I'm fishing the Old Monster, I'm casting it, like casting it on deeper points, making casts around brush piles with it. I will pitch it and flip it in bushes occasionally, but the 3/0 hook in a big worm is basically all you need. This is the one that I had the hardest time with, because I thought that, okay, this is a big honking worm, and when the fish gets this whole worm in its mouth, there's all types of plastic in there. And ever since I went to the 3/0, I started catching a lot more. And finally, one of my favorite lures is the this is the dead ringer, the Zoom dead ringer. It's an old ringworm. Guys, this is a great worm. If you guys have never tried it, the old ringworm or the Zoom dead ringer is really good. My favorite way is to, in fact, the last Bassmaster tournament I won, I caught most of them on this the last day of the tournament. But I use a number 1. This is the smallest hook I use. This is not a 1/0. This is a number 1. And same type of deal on the ringworm. Just go through the side like that. Just like that. Number 1 hook. That will definitely get you some bites on it. So anyway, guys, that's sort of an overview. That's the hooks that I use with it. Just to wrap it up here, you know, when you're talking about this hook and soft plastics, a lot of it is a matter of experimentation. What I've shared with you guys today, it may seem simple, but this is something, man, that took me a long time to figure out. And I figured it out through trial and error and through losing a lot of fish. I mean, I was so hard-headed and it took me so long to figure this out that, you know, I look back and it's like, God, I would have done so much better in tournaments if I'd have figured this out earlier. But one of the things you got to remember is back when I was going through this, that's when we had the old hooks for the most part. We didn't have the chemically sharpened hooks. We had larger diameters. We had all that stuff, you know, with it as well. And then we didn't quite know as much. I mean, that's the one thing about bass fishing. The more as the generations go by and the more that people experiment and try new innovative, you know, techniques and, you know, just like what I did with these hooks here, you figure stuff out like that out. So the main thing is try to match your hook size, smallest size you can get away with the bait that you're using. And also a lot of it will help you out on the soft plastic setting the hook. We've talked about this before in some of my other videos. You don't ever want to set the hook hard. You don't ever want to set the hook on a slack line. And again, this is from my experience. I mean, some people may disagree with it, but from my experience, all the years of fishing I have is when I get a bite on a Texas rig soft plastic lure, I let the fish move with it for quite a while. I'll let them move with it for 5 or 10 feet sometimes, 5 feet usually maybe, and then reel down, take up the slack, and I just pull back and reel. And I pull back fairly hard, not hard enough where I'm actually setting the hook hard, but I just pull back and reel at the same time. And I feel that just penetrates the fish's mouth better without tearing it. I think a lot of times if you try to set the hook hard, especially on a slack line, especially if it's on a short distance, you know, you're gonna tear the fish's mouth if it's in a thin part of it. But anyway, guys, I'll put all that stuff, those links in the description, the stuff that I'm talking about here. If you can take anything away from this video is go smaller than what you think you need to go. And I know it's hard to do. I know you look at that, it's like, God, I'm gonna lose fish doing this. But you know, once you do it and once you start getting some bites on it, you'll get confidence in doing it. And it just definitely will add up to more bites and more fish for you. So hope you enjoyed it, guys, and hope it helps out. We'll talk next week.